Hey guys, hope that all is well. Hope you've been all doing fine. Hopefully your families are safe and healthy. That's all that matters. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to be working with the cylinder this week. Whereas last week we worked with a rectangular prism that looked like a box, today we're going to be working with a cylinder that looks like a can. So today we're going to focus on surface area of a cylinder. Tomorrow we're going to focus on volume of a cylinder. And again, a bunch of you may already know what a cylinder looks like. It looks exactly like a can, right? So you have a cylinder, right? And so the difference already between a cylinder and a rectangular prism is that whereas a prism had rectangles going around like a box would, a cylinder doesn't have rectangles. And instead, on the bases, the top and the bottom, it has circles with, think of the can, where you have the paper that's going around the sides of a cylinder, right? And again, what we're going to do tomorrow with surface area is volume. Today we're going to work with surface area of the cylinder, right? And the one mistake that I noticed some people making was just be careful when it comes to surface area and volume. Surface area has to do with how much is on the outside of a figure, and volume has to do with how much is inside of the figure. So today we're going to focus on how much is actually on the outside of a figure. How do you figure out how much surface area is on a cylinder? And in order to do that, there is a formula for it, and it's going to look a little bit complicated. And what that formula is surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. And again, when it comes to these formulas, I'll always update them on the formula sheet that's online on Pearson. Feel free to always use that resource whenever it comes to doing assignments, quizzes, and tests. It's always there. But where does this come from? So right now we notice that there's an r there, and all that r means it's just the radius, right? So we have the radius of a circle, and then we have the h, which is the height of the cylinder. And that's all the variables that we need. We need the radius, and we need the height. And where this formula comes from, again, is you have a cylinder. Let's say that you were to take a can apart, right? You would have the circle on the top. I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but if you were to unwrap the paper on a can, it gives you a rectangle, right? So on that rectangle is the paper. You have the rectangle, which is the paper. You have the top lid. You have the bottom lid. Sorry that the picture looks horrible, guys. It looks really bad. So you have the top lid, you have the bottom lid, and then you have the paper that's going around. And that's where that formula comes from. Because what that represents is, let's say that, looking at just the first part, we know that pi r squared represents the area of one circle, right? So that's the area of one circle, but since there are two circles, that's where this 2 comes from. So basically it's saying that it's 2 circles. So that's what it represents. It's the 2 circles, right? And you don't have to memorize this. I just want to show you where it comes from. What the second part represents is actually the paper. So this here was pi r squared, right? This was pi r squared, and since we have 2 of them, that's where 2 pi r squared comes from. What this represents is 2 pi rh. And the reason it represents that is since it's a rectangle, formula for finding area of a rectangle is base times height. Since this paper is wrapped around a circle, we know what goes around a circle is circumference. So, since we're talking about the circumference, we know that the formula for circumference is 2 pi r. We know that this is height, and the way that you do it is base times height, 2 pi r times h, 2 pi r h. And again, I don't want to complicate this, I just want to show you where it comes from. It's all it is. It's the rectangle that goes around, it's the 2 circles that's on the top and the bottom, and since we're talking about the total surface area, that's why we're adding them. Because if we're talking about the total, we have to add the 2 to give us the total surface area. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to use that formula to try to find the surface area of a cylinder. Right? And now let me give you some examples just so you can see the difference for it. So again, we're working with surface area. Surface area of a cylinder, right? Surface area of a cylinder. And we're going to use the formula, but I want to actually use numbers now, just so you can see how you would apply this. Instead of saying r now, instead of saying height, let's actually give it value. let's say that the radius is, 6 centimeters, right? And let's say that the height is 10 centimeters. Radius is 6, right? That's 6 centimeters. And then we know that the height is 10. So what we're gonna do is, again, we're gonna use the formula that we have. And let me just separate this so it doesn't give you any issues. We know that the formula is 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi r h. And now with that formula, all we're gonna start doing now, it's just substituting. So the first thing we know, let's start with the first part. We know that it's gonna be 2, it's always 2. We know that it's pi. Now we know that the radius is 6 squared. So all I did was 2 pi, radius is 6 squared. And now the second part's going to end up being 2 pi. We know that the radius is 6. And we know that the height is 10. And that's where everything came from, just substituting everything in. We know that the radius was 6. Radius was 6. And we know that the height is 10. Now it's just simplifying everything. And let's go part by part. Before you can actually start multiplying, we know it's multiplication because whenever you have everything next to each other, it's just multiplying. We do exponents first. So let's keep the 2, let's keep the pi. We now know, just be careful, 6 squared means 6 times 6, not 6 times 2. So we know that 6 times 6, 6 squared is 36. That's where the first part came from. It's just 2 pi, and then 6 times 6 is 36. Now the second one, again, let's bring down the 2, let's bring down the pi, and let's just multiply again, because they're right next to each other. 6 times 10 is 60. Same thing. 2 pi, 6 times 10 is 60. So first part is done with that. And now what we have is, we have two numbers again. Let's just multiply them out. We know that 2 times 36 is 72. Can't forget the pi. Right? And we know that 2 times 60 is 120. Again, don't forget the pi. And where all this came from is same thing. We know that 2 times 36, because it's all together. 2 times 36 is 72. Brought down the pi. And we know that 2 times 60 was 120. Bring down the pi. So we have that now. And now we can start simplifying some more. And what I would tell you is just use 3.14 for pi, just because it makes it so much easier for you guys. So all we did right here was just substituted everything again. We did 72 times 3.14 plus 120 times 3.14. Now let's just multiply it. We know that 72 times 3.14 is going to be 226.08. And I wrote these numbers down. That's what I'm looking at right now. So 72 times 3.14 gives me 226.08. We know that 120 times 3.14 gives me 376.8. And again, just want to show you that 120 times 3.14 gives me 376.8. Now we have those two numbers. We know that the first part was 226.08. We know that the second part is 376.8. Now the last step we got to do is add those two numbers. And whenever you add those two numbers, those two areas, it gives you 602.88. And where I got that number from, it was literally just from adding this first area and then that. And once you add them up, it gives you 602.88. And since it's centimeters, we would put centimeters squared. And we can't forget the squared. It's also squared because since we're talking about surface area, whenever it's area, area is always squared. And just remember, since we're talking about surface area, that's how much this cylinder would have on the outside. Let's try another one. But that's all surface area is, guys. That's how you use the formula for a cylinder. Looks complicated at first, but after you get the hang of it, it does make life a lot easier just to use it all. And again, I'll always give you the formulas whenever it comes to quizzes, whenever it comes to tests, whenever it comes to the homework assignments. It's all under that page that you have on Pearson that says geometry formulas. Second one, let's try one last one. Let's say you have a cylinder, and sorry about the horrible drawing. You have a cylinder, right? And again, you have a dotted line just because it's the back part. And now we know that we have the radius, which is going to be 3 feet, right? So let's say that the radius is 3 feet, and we know that the height is going to be 5 feet. And just like we did before, I want you guys to actually find the surface area of this. And so let's use the formula. Surface area equals 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi RH. And now it's just substituting everything. Let's work this out. So whenever we substitute it now, it's going to be 2 pi. We know that the radius is 3 squared. So again, 2 pi, radius is 3 squared, plus the second part is going to be 2 pi. We know that the radius is 3 again, and we know that the height is 5. That's the second part. So it's 2 times pi, the radius is 3, and the height is 5. And now it's just simplifying like we did before. So let's do the exponent before anything else. We know that it's going to be 2 pi, and we know that 3 squared, 3 times 3 gives you 9. Again, it's 3 times 3, not 3 times 2. 3 times 3 is 9. And now the second part is going to be 2 pi. And again, multiply. 3 times 5 is 15, which came from 3 times 5. So first part is done. 3 squared was 9. 3 times 5 was 15. That's the first part. Next part, just like we did before, just multiply all the numbers that we have. We know that 2 times 9 is 18 pi. Right? We know that 2 times 15 is 30 pi. Again, 2 times 9 is 18. 2 times 15 was 30. We can't forget the pi's. Going there now, just like we did before, wherever you see pi, write 3.14 just to make it easier, plus 30 times 3.14 again. Just get in the habit of that at home if it makes your life a lot easier. Pi, just use 3.14. So now we have 18 times 3.14. We have 30 times 3.14, which once we simplify this, 18 times 3.14 gives me 56.52. When you multiply 18 and 3.14, you get 56.52. When we multiply 30 and 3.14, it gives me 94.2. And again, when you multiplied 18 and 3.14, it gave me 56.52. When you multiply 30 and 3.14, it gave me 94.2. And now our final step, just make sure you add those two numbers. So when you add this and that, it ends up giving you 150.72. And again, since it's feet, it's going to be feet. And since we're talking about surface area, it's going to be square. Area is always square. Again, and if we're talking about this figure, surface area is just how much space is on the outside. And if we're talking about the outside, square, surface area. Again, guys, today we did surface area. I'll always give you these formulas. Tomorrow we're going to work with volume. So surface area is how much is on the outside. Volume is how much is on the inside. If you guys need any help, feel free to message me. All the best, guys. Take care.